Family betrayal. Parents shield $40,000 debt while breaching my bank account. I never imagined that the one person I had worked so tirelessly to protect, my future, my hard-won independence, the very essence of who I had become, could be held hostage by the same people who raised me. For as long as I can remember, I have been the responsible one, the steady pillar of our fractured family, the one expected to shoulder burdens not meant for someone my age. Today, I stand at the crossroads of obligation and self-preservation, a 35-year-old middle manager at a leading Silicon Valley software firm, forced to confront a family dynamic steeped in favoritism, deception, and manipulation. And as I write this, I realize that my story, though painful and laden with betrayal, is also a testament to the strength it takes to finally say, enough. A childhood of unbalanced scales. Growing up in a quaint suburban town just outside Boston, our family was the epitome of what many would call the ideal American household. On the surface, it was a picture-perfect life, a comfortable home in a good neighborhood, parents who maintained stable jobs, my mother teaching elementary school part-time and my father working in insurance, and the unspoken promise that every child would receive equal love and support. Yet beneath that idyllic facade lay a reality far removed from the balanced scales of fairness. From the moment I turned 18 and embarked on the path of total self-sufficiency, emotionally, intellectually, and above all, financially, I bore the weight of an unyielding expectation. I was the golden child, the responsible one, the exemplar of perfection. My younger brother, Jason, by contrast, was coddled and defended, no matter how often his behavior veered into the reckless or irresponsible. I remember one stark instance from my teenage years, when I was 16 and Jason was merely 8. I had received a B+ on a chemistry test, a grade that, in any other context, would have been a minor hiccup. Yet, my parents' reaction was swift and punishing. I was grounded for a month. They told me, with an air of disappointment that stung like acid, that I was wasting my potential. Meanwhile, when Jason was caught for the third time pilfering money from our father's wallet, their response was to dismiss it as just a phase. I was expected to carry the burden of perfection and leadership, while my brother's missteps were brushed aside as temporary lapses. Every achievement of mine was met not with pride but with the question, what about Jason? Every misstep of his was excused with a careless, he'll learn eventually, or, he's just sensitive. I labored through high school, juggling a part-time job at a local coffee shop, volunteering at the library, and taking every advanced placement class available to me, all to maintain the flawless image that my parents demanded. In contrast, Jason drifted through his days in the basement, lost in video games and fleeting distractions, unburdened by the crushing expectation to excel. The inequity was relentless, the pressure inescapable. When I eventually left home at 18, scraping together the money from my part-time jobs to rent a tiny studio apartment, it was not out of a desire for independence but a desperate bid to escape the constant comparison and guilt that came with sharing my life with my brother. Even as I struggled to forge a path on my own, working 2 jobs in college, taking on student debt, and sacrificing nights of sleep, I watched in silent agony as Jason remained comfortably ensconced in the safety of our family home, receiving allowances and emotional support with ease. The stark contrast in our lives was a persistent, painful reminder that my parents' love and attention were never as freely given to me as they were to him. The fateful call years passed, and I built my life from the ground up, a testament to my hard work, sleepless nights, and the countless sacrifices I made. I acquired a modest house, a reliable car, and a financial cushion that had been forged in the crucible of relentless determination. Yet, just as I was beginning to savor the fruits of my labor, the specter of my family's dysfunction reared its head once more in a call that would forever alter the course of my life. It began as one of those rare, unsettlingly polite phone calls from my mother, a call that always carried an undercurrent of ulterior motives. Her voice, unusually gentle and even, inquired about the minutiae of my daily life. "How's work? Are you still at that tech company? Have you been eating well?" she asked, her tone dripping with a feigned interest that felt all too rehearsed. I sensed immediately that something was off. It wasn't the first time I'd received such a call, but today, every word felt laden with premonition. After a few minutes of banal small talk, the conversation took a turn I had anticipated yet dreaded. "Jason is
Subscribe now. Join us today.
in trouble," she said quietly, as if confessing a secret. The line fell silent for a moment, a pregnant pause that sent a chill down my spine. He's accumulated $40,000 in debt, she continued, her voice trembling as if the number itself was an incantation of impending doom. I remember sitting there in my home office, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, and feeling as though the very ground beneath me had shifted. $40,000 wasn't some trivial sum, it was a down payment for a home, the result of a year's labor, a safety net I had painstakingly built for myself. And now, my mother was asking me to risk it all. When I hesitantly inquired, "How did this ever happen?" I braced myself for the inevitable barrage of excuses. But instead of offering a detailed explanation, she brushed off my concerns with the familiar, dismissive phrase, "That doesn't matter right now." Then, in a tone that could only be described as chilling, she invoked the sacred family mantra. Family helps family. It was as if those 3 words were meant to shackle me, binding me once again to the role I had long resisted. "You've done so well for yourself," she said, "but Jason is not like you. He needs your help. He's sensitive. You know how he gets under pressure." Her words were laced with a potent mix of guilt and obligation. For the first time in my life, I found the strength to say, "No." My voice was soft but firm, apologizing as I declined her request. I explained that I simply could not jeopardize everything I had built for the reckless misadventures of my brother. In that moment, as I uttered those 3 simple words, I felt a liberation so intense it bordered on physical pain, a release from a lifetime of coerced sacrifice. But the relief was short-lived. Almost instantly, my mother's tone transformed from one of feigned concern to one of seething rage. In a voice that reverberated with betrayal and anger, she screamed, "You're being selfish. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You're abandoning your family when they need you most." Her words pounded against my resolve, each syllable a blow that threatened to shatter the fragile fortress I had built around my heart. I ended the call, my hands trembling and my chest constricted, as though an invisible weight pressed down on me. And yet, beneath the crushing burden of guilt and the relentless pressure to conform, I felt an unfamiliar sense of relief. For the first time, I had stood my ground. I had refused to sacrifice my future for a pattern of destructive behavior that had been allowed to fester for far too long. A sinister unraveling. The fallout of that call was swift and terrifying. Almost as soon as I hung up, a barrage of text messages began flooding my phone, a relentless campaign of guilt-tripping, emotional manipulation, and thinly veiled threats. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Last Tuesday, I received an alert from my bank, a notification of a suspicious activity attempt. My heart sank as I listened to the explanation. Someone had tried to access my account using stolen personal information. My bank's fraud department informed me that the attempted transfer had been flagged due to a dubious IP address. The most chilling detail was that the perpetrator had answered all the standard security questions correctly. My mother's maiden name, my social security number, even the name of my first pet. I realized with a cold, creeping certainty that only one person in our family had access to all that information, Jason. In that moment, my personal betrayal transformed into something altogether more sinister. The $40,000 I had refused to give was not the only danger I now faced. The money I had labored so hard to earn was under direct threat from the very people I had once trusted. I immediately updated every security detail, changing passwords, altering my security questions, and setting up additional layers of protection on all my accounts. I was no longer just fighting for my financial stability. I was defending my identity and, in essence, my very self. The sense of violation was profound. It wasn't just the monetary value at risk. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to love and protect me had instead turned my own family ties into weapons. The feeling of betrayal was almost too much to bear. Later that day, as I grappled with the implications of this identity theft, Aunt Catherine called me. Her voice was a lifeline in the sea of chaos, filled with genuine concern and disbelief. Over the phone, she revealed that our parents had been spinning an entirely different narrative to everyone in the family. According to her, they had painted me as the heartless, greedy one, a person who hoarded wealth while Jason, their perfect son, struggled with his own demons. My aunt's shock was palpable when I recounted the attempted bank fraud. She confessed that Jason had, in recent months, been borrowing money from various relatives under a myriad of excuses: medical fees, dubious investments, even vague promises of a sure thing business venture. I felt as though the foundation of my family's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The truth, long buried beneath layers of lies and denial, was slowly emerging. My Phone buzzed again. A message from my father, delivered in an email that was as icy and calculated as it was menacing. The email read, "Your actions are forcing us to reconsider your position in this family. Your mother and I have always provided for you, supported your education, and given you every opportunity to succeed. Your current success is a direct result of our sacrifices. If you continue to abandon your brother in his time of need, there will be consequences. Think carefully about your next
Subscribe now. Join us today.
move." The email, with its thinly veiled threat, struck me with a mix of incredulity and sadness. My student loans still haunted me, yet my parents boasted about funding my education, as if that made everything else I'd sacrificed worthwhile. The chilling warning left no room for negotiation, assist Jason, or risk being severed from the only family I'd ever known. Confrontation in the shadows days later, with the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a vice, I knew that silence was no longer an option. I had to confront Jason face to face. A confrontation that I had dreaded for years but which now seemed inevitable. I made my way to his residence, a dilapidated apartment in a part of the city that reeked of neglect and despair. The building itself seemed to mirror Jason's state, unkempt, unstable, and teetering on the edge of collapse. When the door finally creaked open, there he was. Jason, unshaven and haggard, wearing a tattered t-shirt that hinted at years of neglect. His eyes held a strange mixture of indifference and entitlement. "You were patient enough to come," he remarked with a smirk, as if my very presence was an inconvenience he tolerated. I wasted no time. "Jason, the attempted bank fraud. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate breach of trust. You used my personal information to try to access my account. And for what? To cover your debts?" My voice was steady, but inside, I was seething with a cocktail of anger, betrayal, and sorrow. His response was disturbingly nonchalant, as if discussing a minor inconvenience. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an attempt to fix things. It was just expediting the procedure, he said, as though the concept of responsibility were as abstract as the weather. His tone, so casual, belied the gravity of his actions. I noticed something amiss as I glanced around his cluttered living room. Scattered across a battered coffee table were several phones and a collection of credit card statements bearing unfamiliar names. Before I could ask, Jason quickly swept them into a drawer, a gesture that betrayed a secret far deeper than I had imagined. My stomach twisted with the realization that this was not merely about a one-time bank account hack. There was a labyrinth of deceit behind these actions, evidence of a long history of financial misdeeds and identity manipulations. Just then, as if summoned by fate, the storm within our family reached its zenith. My parents arrived unexpectedly, their presence heavy with anger and regret. My mother's eyes glistened with tears as she launched into a tirade of self-righteous accusations, while my father's face was contorted with rage and disappointment. In the ensuing maelstrom of voices, each accusing and deflecting blame, I felt the cumulative weight of decades of resentment and unhealed wounds come crashing down. "You're abandoning us, abandoning your brother," my mother wailed, her voice rising to a crescendo. My father's words cut through the chaos. "If it involved family, is identity theft acceptable?" Their accusations, delivered with all the venom of years of suppressed frustration, were almost surreal. As I stood there, recording every moment on my phone, I knew that this confrontation was a turning point. In that charged moment, I recounted the years of favoritism, the countless instances where I was forced to be the responsible one, while Jason's missteps were shrugged off as mere lapses. I detailed every injustice, every sacrifice, and every instance where my parents' hypocrisy had stifled my potential. I laid bare the cold truth that their unwavering support for Jason had not only shaped his destructive behavior but had also siphoned away the love and validation I had so desperately craved. Jason's retort was dismissive, a smirk and a careless shrug that spoke of entitlement rather than remorse. "At least I'm not a stuck-up brat who thinks she's better than everyone else," he sneered. The final straw came when my father, gripping my arm as if to anchor me to the past, whispered in a tone that chilled me to the core, "Never expect to be welcomed in this family again if you walk out that door." That moment, those words were like a death knell. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "That sounds more like a promise than a threat." With that, I turned away, leaving behind a room filled with bitter echoes and shattered illusions. The recording of our conversation, the damning evidence of their collusion and manipulation, was securely saved on my phone. I knew it would be my lifeline, my shield, should they ever try to drag me back into their toxic embrace. The reckoning back at home, The aftermath of that confrontation continued to reverberate through every facet of my life. I blocked their numbers and began drafting an email that would soon be sent to every extended family member. An email that included screenshots of threatening messages, transcripts of our conversation, and even documentation of the bank fraud attempt. I wanted the truth to be known, not as a tool of revenge, but as a necessary step towards reclaiming my identity and independence. My phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls and urgent messages. I could feel the tension mounting as I prepared for the inevitable fallout. I reached out to my firm's IT security team and arranged for additional measures to protect not only my bank accounts, but all of my digital assets. Every email, every text message, every voicemail was now recorded and archived. I had transformed my vulnerability into a fortress of evidence, ensuring that I would not be manipulated or cornered again. Then, amid this maelstrom of digital warfare and familial strife, came a call from my aunt, a call that provided a glimpse of clarity in the midst of chaos. Aunt Catherine's voice was warm but tinged with sorrow as she recounted what she had learned from various family members. Apparently, Jason had been borrowing money from nearly everyone under a variety of excuses. To our old grandma, he had claimed he needed funds for medical fees. To our cousin Mark, he promised a sure-thing investment. And according to Uncle Steve, he had confessed to owing money to dangerous individuals. Each story was a fragment of a much larger, dark mosaic of deceit. Even more startling was a revelation that came later that same morning. My father's email had not been an isolated threat. It was the tip of an iceberg, a desperate attempt to control me by using our shared family history as a weapon. The thought that they could twist our past sacrifices into a chain that bound me to their whims made my blood boil. I decided then that silence was no longer an option. I began researching legal avenues, restraining orders, legal recourse for identity theft, and every possible measure to sever the toxic ties that held me captive. With every piece of evidence I gathered, I felt more empowered, more resolute in my decision to no longer be the scapegoat for my family's dysfunction. The social media coup in a final, desperate bid to reclaim my narrative, I turned to social media, the very platform where my extended family, friends, and acquaintances all gathered to share their lives and, sometimes, their judgments. I meticulously compiled everything: the screenshots of the bank fraud alert, Jason's own admissions, the recording of the heated family confrontation, and even the threatening messages from my parents. With careful precision, I crafted a post that was both raw and truthful, detailing every moment of betrayal and manipulation. I did not intend to exact revenge, nor was I seeking to incite a scandal. I simply wanted the truth to be known, the truth that lay hidden beneath years of carefully constructed lies. Within hours of posting, the response was overwhelming. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and even distant relatives began to reach out, sharing their own stories of being wronged by the same cycle of favoritism and enablement. Jason's network of deceit began to unravel. My cousin Tim revealed that Jason had once taken out a $5,000 loan for an unfulfilled business venture, and Aunt Beth admitted that she had been roped into co-signing a loan that she was now desperately trying to repay. The tide of public opinion shifted swiftly. The carefully curated image my parents had long maintained, the image of a devoted, selfless family, began to crack under the pressure of undeniable evidence. Even our grandmother's long-missing jewels, a family mystery that had been whispered about for years, now found a likely suspect in the tangled web of Jason's misdeeds. To my astonishment, even Jason's own roommate, who had initially been oblivious to his financial misadventures, came forward with details that further exposed the extent of his fraud. It was clear that the shockwaves of that one fateful call were transforming not only my life but the entire dynamics of our family. My parents, once the indisputable gatekeepers of our family's narrative, now found themselves isolated. The very people they had long manipulated began to distance themselves, their voices softening into hushed whispers of disapproval. Even my father's golf friends, those who once admired him, were suddenly too busy to entertain his attempts at reconciliation. My mother's feeble attempts to dismiss everything as just a misunderstanding were met with harsh scrutiny, as every recorded word, every documented threat, stood as irrefutable proof of the reality I had long known but no longer wished to tolerate. A new dawn in the weeks that followed. A profound transformation took hold of my life. I began to see that, for the first time in years, I was finally free to focus on my own
Subscribe now. Join us today.
professional and personal growth without the relentless strain of family turmoil. The weight of guilt that had so long chained me to a role I never wanted was lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism that allowed me to envision a future defined by self-respect and integrity. I secured a job promotion at work, a testament to my dedication and ability to focus amid chaos. I began to surround myself with people who respected boundaries, people who valued transparency and accountability over the messy entanglements of family drama. And slowly, I started to dismantle the network of secrets that had, for so long, held me captive. Yet even as I moved forward, the scars of the past remained indelibly etched in my memory. I couldn't help but wonder if, in my quest for independence, I had forever severed the ties that bound me to the only family I had ever known. There was a lingering doubt, a whispered question in the back of my mind, wondering if I was somehow selfish for putting myself first. But then I remembered the countless nights of sacrifice, the unspoken promise I made to myself when I left home, and the cold, hard truth that I had been manipulated for far too long. On a crisp morning last week, as I installed new security cameras around my home and double-checked every digital safeguard, I realized that I had finally reclaimed control of my life. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the quiet hum of technology working in my favor, and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. I thought of my younger self, the girl who longed for parental approval, who believed that love was synonymous with sacrifice, and I acknowledged the painful journey that had led me to this point. I had taken a stand. I had defended not just my bank account, but my very soul. And in doing so, I had given voice to every suppressed emotion, every tear shed in isolation, and every moment of quiet despair that had marked my years of servitude to a dysfunctional legacy. The final update, breaking free today. I write this final update with a sense of cautious triumph. I have severed the chains of toxic familial obligation, no longer willing to serve as the perpetual safety net for someone who refuses to learn from his mistakes. I have learned that true family is not defined by blood alone but by the mutual respect, accountability, and genuine care that we extend to one another. My parents' manipulation, their relentless guilt-tripping, and their willingness to risk my financial security for the sake of their misguided sense of duty are now relics of a past I refuse to be haunted by any longer. I have assembled a new network, a chosen family, of friends, colleagues, and mentors who share my values of integrity and respect. In this new chapter, I am not defined by the mistakes of others, nor am I forced to carry the burden of someone else's irresponsibility. I have taken steps to consult with legal advisors and financial experts, ensuring that I am fully prepared for whatever may come next. I have secured restraining orders and bolstered every digital barrier, knowing that vigilance is the price of freedom. There is a bittersweet irony in the way events have unfolded. The very act of sharing my truth on social media, of letting the world see the dark underbelly of our family's secrets, has not only liberated me but has also given others the courage to step forward. Extended family members, who once accepted the narrative of favoritism and manipulation, are now speaking out. The collective voice of those wronged by this toxic dynamic has grown louder, forcing the truth into the light where it can no longer be ignored. As I reflect on everything, from the call that shattered a lifetime of complacency, to the attempted bank fraud that exposed the depths of our family's betrayal, to the final confrontation that set me free, I realize that this is not the end, but rather the beginning of a journey toward true independence. It is the beginning of a life where I am no longer defined by the sins of my past, but rather by the strength I have found in rising above them. I share this story not as a cautionary tale of bitterness, but as an ode to the power of reclaiming one's identity. It is a reminder that sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not on distant fields, but in the very heart of our own families. And while the scars may never fully fade, they serve as a map of our journey, a journey from being manipulated and controlled to standing tall in the light of our own truth. In this newfound freedom, I have discovered that the truth, once revealed, has a way of healing. The walls that once separated me from my true self have crumbled, replaced by bridges of understanding and mutual respect. I know that there may still be days when doubt creeps in, when the old guilt whispers that I am somehow wrong for prioritizing my own future. But each time that doubt surfaces, I remind myself of the strength it took to say no on that fateful day, and of the clarity that followed. I now live with the certainty that my worth is not measured by the sacrifices I am forced to make for others, but by the integrity with which I live my life. I am no longer the perennial scapegoat, the silent sufferer who bore the brunt of familial dysfunction. I am a survivor, a fighter, and above all, a person who deserves to live free from the chains of manipulation and deceit. To anyone reading this who finds themselves caught in a similar struggle, torn between the demands of duty and the need to protect one's own future, I offer the simple truth: your life is yours to lead. You are not obligated to sacrifice your well-being for the sake of someone else's irresponsibility. Boundaries are not a sign of selfishness, they are an act of self-respect. As I close this chapter and open the door to a new beginning, I want to thank everyone who has supported me along the way, those who reached out with kind words, shared their own experiences, and reminded me that I was not alone in this fight. The journey ahead may still be fraught with uncertainty, but I face it with a clear heart and a determined spirit, knowing that I have finally found the courage to break free. Today, I am no longer the family's safety net. I have taken control of my destiny, and in doing so, I hope to inspire others to reclaim their own power. The truth is out, the lies have been exposed, and the bonds of manipulation have been broken. This is my story, a story of pain, betrayal, and ultimately, liberation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing this transformation. I move forward now, not with the weight of the past, but with the lightness of a future defined by my own choices. A future where I am free to build a life of integrity, accountability, and true self-respect. And while the echoes of yesterday may still linger, I am finally ready to embrace the dawn of a new day. Epilogue: as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, I continue to fortify every aspect of my life against the forces that once sought to control me. The call that started it all, with its chilling demand and the subsequent attempted fraud, is now just one chapter in a much larger narrative. A narrative where I have learned that true strength lies not in sacrificing for others, but in standing up for oneself. In the quiet moments, when I look out the window at the neighborhood I fought so hard to call my own, I feel a deep sense of peace. It is a peace earned through countless battles, a peace that whispers of the resilience of the human spirit. I know that the road ahead will have its challenges, and that remnants of old wounds may resurface from time to time. But now, I carry with me the knowledge that I am not alone. My chosen family, my colleagues, and even the distant voices of those who found courage in my story are there to remind me of my worth. I have come to understand that breaking free from the chains of a dysfunctional legacy is not an act of rebellion, but rather a necessary step toward healing. It is an act of love, for oneself and for the possibility of a better tomorrow. In this new chapter of my life, I am no longer defined by the mistakes of my past, but rather by the promise of a future filled with hope, respect, and above all, freedom. This is my truth. This is the story of how I finally reclaimed my life from the toxic grasp of familial obligation, how I fought back against the manipulation and deceit that had threatened to consume me. And though the journey was long and the scars remain, I now walk forward with a clear vision of who I am and what I deserve, a life free from guilt, unburdened by the past, and brimming with the promise of self-determination. Thank you for bearing witness to my journey. May this story serve as a beacon of hope for anyone trapped in the shadow of manipulation, reminding you that you, too, have the strength to break free and write your own destiny. End of story.
Subscribe now. Join us today. Enter beyond reality, where enchanting story times, thrilling mysteries, and timeless adventures ignite your imagination. Subscribe now. Join us today.